Hey everyone, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, where the heck you are, whatever the heck you're doing, I am glad you are here. Hey, so if you always wanted to communicate with more impact, with just more authority, right? Have a better intention, activate people, transform your life by communicating better. Well, the great news is today we've got the author of Communicating with Impact, the amazing, inspiring, always intentional, and always helpful. Patrick Donadio with us. He's going to teach us this. He wrote the book, ironically enough, called Communicating with Impact. That's not ironic. That's on purpose. And I'm just delighted that he's here. If you don't know Patrick, you're missing out. He's a keynote speaker. He's a communication strategist, and he empowers audiences at international, national, and state conferences. He's trained and coached thousands of people from Fortune 500 companies to associations across industries. He's guided 2 generations of leaders, even though he's only 14, and their organizations with powerful keynotes, engaging presentations, and one-on-one business communication coaching. From the boardroom to the classroom, he helps us all communicate with clarity, lead more effectively, present with power, and increase sales and profits. And he's shared the stage with, get this, Magic Johnson, Joan London, Lou Holtz, and Jeff Foxworthy, just to name a few. And now I get to share the stage with Patrick Donadio. What's up, brother? How are you?
Hey, Phil. How you doing, my friend?
Good. I'm so glad that you're here, Patrick. It's great to see you again, buddy.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Yeah. So, hey, so I got to tell you, right? So I'm a simple guy. I love the fact that you simply came up with an acronym for communicating with impact, because that makes it real easy. So take us through, what was the genesis behind starting Communicating with Impact?
Well, Phil, I started doing this business about 30 some years ago. So it's nice that you said I'm only 14, because that's very nice of you.
It's true.
But, I started doing communication skills training. And as I was doing some of the training, I started to think about, I didn't see any processes. I mean, I have an undergrad degree in radio, TV communications. So I learned a lot about communicating, but I didn't really see a system. And I happened to be in Japan in 1991 as a Goodwill ambassador. And I was eating at a fast food restaurant because I was homesick. And I said, can I go to McDonald's? And my host family took me to McDonald's, and I was eating the French fries. And it dawned on me, I'm all the way across the world, and those French fries taste exactly the same. And I thought to myself, boy, if I had a system like that can get similar consistency when you communicate, that'd be great. And so that's how I got on the journey. And then the book, came many years later. I'm a slow learner, but eventually got the book out a couple years ago.
There you go. No, that's great. Yeah, I remember when the book came out. It's really good stuff. It's helpful. And I wouldn't say you're a slow learner. I think you're a slow practicer, because you want to have practical stuff. That's the one thing that I like the most about you, is it's always practical, tactical stuff that leaders and salespeople can do to actually do this. So let's talk through the model, and then we're going to go deeper in this, Patrick. So first, the I is intention. So what does that mean?
Yeah, the intention, and again, as you mentioned, I try to make stuff easy. It's the impact. You memorize the impact word, you got the 6 keys. The I is for the intention. And of course, the first step to any communication is, thinking about what's the purpose, right? Why am I having a conversation? Our intention today is be talking with your guests and viewers to give them a lot of value about being a better communicator. So that's a very simple step. In fact, that's a step that I think a lot of people almost think is so simple, they forget this step.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it does seem really simple, but if we don't frame it, then it's hard to have a conversation, because I'm going to go left, you're going to go right, I'm going to go up, you're going to go down. What are we doing here? So it's really that kind of, would you say that's a preparation step, Patrick? Because you kind of have this book split into 2, right?
Yeah, we have the first half of the process is what I call preparation of the content. The second half is preparation of the delivery. And then once you've got both pieces prepared, then of course you deliver it. So yeah. Awesome. So everything starts with a thought, right, Phil? I mean, you always think about stuff and then you create things. But yet some people, and we'll talk later in the P step, some personalities, tend to start to talk before they think. And that's the problem.
Yeah. I sometimes do that. I'm certainly a capital E extrovert, but I try my best to focus on that intention first, so that I can be smarter. But with that, then we have to shift into M, which is the message, which is, I think that's the one that we spend the most time on, huh, Patrick?
I think so. And again, once you know the intention, and we'll talk a little more later maybe about some ways to get clarity around the intention. But once you know the intention, then of course, like, what do I want to say to help me achieve the intention? So it's almost like working backwards, right? So I know that this is what I would like to have happen as a result of our conversation. Now, what do I say? And so we take a look at both. The M is both the message, and it's also the method, Phil. So I kind of double M'd it. Instead of just, we only have one I, but we got two M's.
Good. Okay. So got it. So message and method, and around that, right? About if we go back to the intention, right? That's not just the intention of what we want to communicate. That's also the intention, perhaps, that we want the message to convey and drive the action if we're in sales. So that might be the intention that we want them to take a next step, or we want them to close business. Is that right?
Yes. Exactly. Like, for example, when you're meeting a new prospect, your intention is probably just to build a relationship, get to know them. My mother always said, don't kiss on the first date. So I think sometimes in a sales process, you get carried away and you forget, oh, this is the first meeting. My intention is just to build a relationship. Now, if that's the case, then when you think about crafting the content for the meeting, think about, okay, what do I say to build relationships? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think what's also interesting about that is we can do this same process. It sounds to me like if we're marketing too, like if my intention is to educate on the power of communication, then I don't have to worry about necessarily what that action of buy my stuff. Instead, I can focus on let me educate with this conversation.
Yeah, and you're right on target, Phil, because you can use this for a conversation. You can use it for social media. You can use it for a phone call when you're sending an email. I mean, communicating is communicating. So the process works everywhere. You have an intention first, and then you think about the message, and then, of course, the method.
Yep. So we got that intention, message, method. Now the P. Here comes the wild card, right? This is the P is Phil, right?
The P is Phil. Exactly. I wrote the book just for you, Phil.
That's it. No, it's the person, the people that we're talking to, right?
Yeah. I call this how do you personalize the message? And so it's not just about personality style, though. I do talk in the book a lot about the different personality styles, and a lot of people are familiar with Myers-Briggs or DISC or strength finders. It's also how do you personalize the message to the receiver, which could also have to do with, their education level or their experience or their knowledge. So it's once you know what you want to achieve and you know what you want to say and what's the right method, then don't just start talking. Think for a few moments about who is the receiver and what's the best way to craft this content for them.
Personalize that message, not just person to person. I think that makes a lot of sense. And salespeople often miss this too because they think it's all about them, right, when it's really all about our receiver, right?
Yeah, it's always about the receiver. Yeah, particularly in the sales process. And even, you and I do a lot of speaking and training, right? The best speakers are the ones that are so focused on the audience that they give so much value. It's not about, that's the story I want to tell. It's about what would be a good story for me to help them learn this point.
That's right. Absolutely. That's why stories, while they're important, if they don't have a point, they're just superfluous and they're not helpful at all.
Exactly.
Good. So we got the intention, the message, and the method. We're personalizing our message. And now we've got to move into the second half of this, right? That's the act piece.
Right. So
like that. So imp, that's the small little person inside us that does that. Now the act is the action. I got that. So A is for activate. What does that mean, Patrick?
Yeah. Activate means how do you stay engaged? How do you activate yourself? And how do you also activate the receiver? As you know, today, Phil, people are very impatient, more so than ever. You probably get maybe 5 to 10 minutes of someone's attention if you're lucky. So you always got to think about how do I keep their attention? But on the same token, you want to keep thinking, how do I stay present, right? And as you know, and a lot of our viewers probably know the importance of being a good listener. So this step talks about the listening concept and also about engaging and activating the receiver.
Excellent. So it goes both ways. We have to be activated as the communicator, and we have to make sure that we activate our receiver, our recipient, the person that we want to get the message. Because if we don't, they're going to fall asleep, right? And
exactly.
whether physically, like actual fall asleep, or their brain's just going to shut down and they're going to think about, hold on, Patrick, I've got some other stuff I got to do. Hold on, just a sec, right? And they're going to deprioritize our message, which makes us not communicate with impact.
Yeah. And then again, these steps, even though they're in a certain order, they really are integrated. So for example, in the activation step, we know that, for example, extroverts probably do a little too much talking. So you want to be mindful about how do you shut up a little bit and start to bring the receiver in. And introverts probably let the other person talk a little too much. And so how do you step it up? So it all kind of comes together, but we still break it up just to make it, kind of clear.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think that's a good point that there's no one way to activate. It's not like this a magic bullet. Oh, check the box. Patrick says you should talk more. No, hold on. Focus on your receiver.
Right.
Focus on what they need. and really be present with them so that you can get better impact on that activation piece, whether it's quiet, talk more, whatever the heck it is. It's really important that you personalize that message to them. Is that right?
Yes. And when I talk about activating, I also like to think of it in a broader perspective. I look at it as almost like a 3D experience. You want to activate them physically, you want to activate them mentally, and you want to activate them emotionally. So it's not just about, I'm going to ask good questions. And that's one way to activate them. But you want to use examples or stories. You want to, maybe change your voice because your pitch of your voice can make people feel differently. So it's really, how do you create an experience? That's kind of what I think most people are looking for today. A lot of salespeople, are not focused on, customer relations. It's about customer experience.
I think that's important, right? And that does take us back to the I, right? The intention of creating a positive experience for our customers that enables them to make a better decision. Hopefully it's our decision, right? That we, in our favor, but it isn't always, because we know that people act in their own best interest, not in ours.
Right. Yeah. So you want to engage them, and again, think about it. And there's a variety of ways, and we can talk about it if you want a little later, but there's so many ways that you can engage people, even though we only think about like interpersonal communications. Even on social media, there's a variety of ways you can engage people. So you always want to keep thinking about, I call it push versus pull. You can push out the information, or you can pull people into the experience. And that's the activation step, is how do you pull them in?
Excellent. Dig that. So we got the A. Now the C is the clarify. Clarify our message. What does that mean, Patrick? It sounds like clarified butter that I put on my popcorn. It's got to be different than that, though.
Well, and in some ways it's the same, because, real clear butter, you can see right through it, right? It's very clear. You can see exactly what's on the other side. And so in this step, you want to make sure that whatever you intended to communicate, they actually received. Some studies show that up to 70 to 90% of your message is screened by the receiver. So even though you and I are doing a very good job of communicating a message, people still have filters, and they screen the message. And so they may not get exactly what we wanted them to get. So you got to clarify to make sure we're both on the same page.
Great. And one of the ways we do that is by paraphrasing, right? We say back, we make sure that we understand. We ask questions like, Patrick, is this what you mean? Am I understanding this correctly? When you said this, does it mean that? Are those the types of things we can do to clarify?
Yeah, those are exactly things you can do. You can ask people questions. You could maybe ask them to summarize. A lot of times we think about doing a summary, which is a nice way to clarify, but even given the fact that people are not paying attention, if you summarize, they might tune out. So you might ask them to do the summary. And in the process, you'll hear back from them what they got, what they didn't get. And if they got everything, great. If they didn't, then you can add to it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, right, if they don't get the steps, we need to maybe back up our truck and go back through some of these points to re-clarify, to kind of stratify that and to separate the message into the pieces that we can really tackle and get clear on.
Yeah. And, another example that you might use in this technique is what I call, the expounding, where you get the other person to actually be a part of the solution. So a lot of times salespeople want to solve the problem for the customer, when if you get them to solve the problem for themselves, they're going to more likely want to buy the product. So it's getting them to come up with solutions, and hopefully they're the same ones we want, but when they come up with them, they'll embrace them more often.
Absolutely. Well, that's how we get commitment.
Yes.
As opposed to just compliance, right? Yeah, I'll do that versus heck yes, I want to do that.
Right.
Really important distinction there.
Yeah. So that's the clarify step. It's a really important step. A lot of people make assumptions, oh yeah, sign here. And we don't even know if they're committed yet.
That's right. Yeah, and that's often why things fail to close. That's why people fail to do the T, which is the best part, and that's the transformation. I always forget this part, Patrick, because to me it seems so obvious that I'm such a great communicator that people are just going to magically transform like they're unicorns, and that's not going to happen, right?
No, it's not. And I'll tell you the truth, Phil, the way I started the book was I've been doing the workshop for many years, so I transcribed the workshop. And I started that as the book. And so I think that's the reason why the book is really jam-packed full of stuff, because it's basically, I took the workshop, I did it backwards. A lot of people write the book and then they create the workshop. But when I originally came up with the impact process, I have to be honest, the T step was thank you. It was like, okay, we clarified, we both got it, thank you, and we're done. But then as I started doing the coaching, I realized, not everybody gets it. Like I'd have a coaching session with a client. They'd say, okay, I want to do this. And then we come back in 2 weeks and I'd say, how's it going? And they'd go, oh, I haven't gotten to that yet. I've been meaning to do that. And I'm like, so see, there's no transformation. So I as I started writing the book, I actually got a lot deeper into the T-step and changed it. And there are really two types of transformations. There is what I call the internal transformation and the external transformation. So you need to take a look at both.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I love your math formula here. You do some math in here, and that kind of scares me, I got to tell you, but you help me out because you just use letters. In transform, you say I plus B plus A equals transform. And Patrick, I'm not a good speller, but I don't see the letter B anywhere in transformation. So how do you get there?
Yeah, well, the letters intention plus action plus behavior change equals transformation. So it's all about not just, that's the internal part, is the intention is also part of the transformation, because you want to understand what's the intention of the receiver. That's the internal part. Like a lot of times, people may have an internal perspective that the price is too high. Okay. But if we don't dig a little deeper, we're not going to know that that's the issue. And so we're going to assume we've got to the C step, they're both on the same page, and we're ready to do the deal. But in reality, we haven't done a very good job selling the value. Mm-hmm. So the belief or the mindset of the customer is price is too high, or I don't see the value. So in the transformation step, you want to probe a little bit to make sure that you identify what are some of the roadblocks, the mental roadblocks. And then you can, once you remove the barriers, then you can move them towards, the closing of the deal.
Yeah, really, really smart. And the book is Communicating with Impact. We're with Patrick Donadio today. Lots of great stuff. We just went through the whole acronym of impact: intention, message, person, personalize, activate, clarify, and transform. So Patrick, you mentioned that many people miss intention, but what do you think, what's the one that people do the best?
Well, again, I think it's going to depend a lot on the different person, but I think a lot of people are really good at focusing on the content. They think a lot about the words and they think a lot about the message. And so I think a lot of people do spend a lot of time there, and that's very important. I don't want to negate that. But all the other steps are really almost as important, because you can have a really good message, but if you don't personalize it, then, people are going to be confused. If you have a really good message and you don't activate it, people are going to be bored. If you have a really good message and you don't transform it, no one's going to buy. So, I think the M step is where people spend a lot of time. But again, you have to have all these pieces together to really make an impact, because just having a good message alone is not going to do it. Yeah.
I could not agree more. I think that's so important, because we do spend so much time locked into the message. We practice. We forget what I think is the most important step, and that's the personalization.
Yes.
Because we don't personalize it to you. I'm talking to Patrick Donadio today, and we're talking to Patrick, and we're going to make sure that we focus on Patrick's needs, as opposed to I'm talking in generalities, which is the opposite of this. So Patrick, how can we prepare to better personalize our communication?
Yeah. Well, again, if you're looking at sales, let's take sales for just a second. I know a lot of your viewers are salespeople. I'm a big believer of, and this is true even when you're making a presentation, do your audience analysis. Before you even get to the event or the meeting, learn about the person. Not only if you can learn their personality style, because that's going to tell you something, but what are their biggest challenges? What are their needs? What's their background, education level? Generations, I'm not a generational expert, but I do know that, if you think about the generational level of the buyer, that's also going to determine what you might want to say or not say. So a lot of preparation, I think, could go into that. And one of the things that I always think is helpful is just, by asking good questions and doing your homework. I mean, with social media today, Phil, years ago, we could never learn about anybody because we would never had a chance to know about them. You just look them up on social media and you know everything about them, maybe more than you want to know. Well, that's a little too much. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, LinkedIn and Twitter and social media, you can do a quick check on your prospect and kind of learn more about them. Maybe they post a lot about their family. So that maybe that's going to tell you they're a relational person. So you might then, when you go in, you can maybe focus on that a little bit. But from your experience, Phil, what do you think are some great tips on how to get to know about the customer?
Well, I like that you said social media because I do think that's important. I think also we should ask other people that know them. So for instance, Patrick, if I'm talking to you and I don't know you, I'm going to look on LinkedIn, I'm going to look on Facebook and see who are the people that we know in common and who do I know best that can give me the best insight that maybe
Right.
communicates the same way that I do so that I can get that information, again, personalized for me, because what I don't need is I don't need some introvert telling me how they communicate with you,
Right.
because you, as a communications expert, you're going to morph to them, not the other way. So what I want is I want someone that's as outgoing as me that says, this is how I interact with Patrick. This is what's important to Patrick based on what my experience was. And so I use that. And then I guess the last thing is that I just remind myself, because I'm an extrovert, to shut up
Yes.
and just
Yeah.
sit with it, right? I have to do that because that's, you want to talk about intention. My intention every time, whether I have a big intention, obviously, of communication and, I might want to persuade, but my intention is to understand the real problem so that
Yes.
I can offer a more valuable solution instead
Yeah.
of just blah, 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 blah. Here's what I think. Because it doesn't matter what I think. I need to know
Exactly.
what is going on in your head.
And I've been around long enough to remember the old style of selling, right, Phil? The old style was talk, 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 convince, convince, push hard enough, and force them to buy. Well, that doesn't work anymore. The new style is ask lots of questions. You're a problem solver. I tell when I do a workshop on business communications, I say, look, take your business card, scratch out your title, and write this title in there, problem solver. That's your title. All you want to do is find out whatever kind of problem the person has that you can help resolve, and then you're going to get the deal.
Yeah, I agree. Now, the other thing, though, that we have to remember is we also have to be a person of value, which means we need to come with our insight, because we do that homework and we understand that chief HR officers have these typical 5 or 7 problems. So
Yes.
we have to do our homework. This is not your whatever, your get out of jail free card to not do your homework. You still
Right.
have to do your homework, right? You cannot ask questions that you could easily see on someone's LinkedIn profile.
Yeah. Yeah. So you want to do both, right? You want to do the pre-work, and then you want to be present enough in the, of course, activation stage to learn about the customer. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've had some, first meetings with clients at coffee, and I'm paying really close attention to how they interact, what their eye contact is like, the rate of their speed of voice, whether they smile a lot. So observable behavior can get you there pretty quickly. And I use DISC. I don't know what maybe a lot of your viewers like, but they're all similar. But on DISC, for example, introvert and extrovert are the 2 easiest things to read. So if I can read the person in the first 5 minutes of the conversation, I'm going to say, okay, I know they're an introvert. That's going to tell me a little bit about what I might want to do. And then extrovert would give me some other tips. But then once you get to the hemisphere, then you can start to say, well, are they more analytical or they're more relational, right? But the easiest thing to read is that introvert extrovert. So pay attention to that, and then you can ask a couple probing questions to get a little clarity. But again, I agree. Do your homework up front so you're not asking stupid questions, so they're going to think, what a waste of my time.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, people don't have time, right? So one of the questions that I always ask as we start out anything, if we're doing a demonstration or we're doing a discovery call, is, so Patrick, if we only have 30 minutes here, if there was 2 or 3 things that were most important to you as we start this meeting to make sure that it was a successful time with you and me, what would those 2 or 3 things be? Is that a question that kind of helps frame the conversation and sets intention, if you will?
Yeah, it's a great question because you're getting clarity, right? And again, as I said, even though the clarity step is, later on in the process, it doesn't mean you don't use it throughout the whole process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Patrick, let's go deeper on one more. Let's go deeper on the activation, because
Okay.
I think that's an important one. I think it's one that folks can struggle with because they get activated, but maybe they didn't activate their person, or maybe the other way around. So take us through first, how do we get ourselves activated in a conversation?
Okay, good. So let's talk about the how you keep yourself activated, right? And then we'll talk about how to activate the receiver. So for most of us, we have to remember that particularly, let's say it's a face-to-face interaction or on the phone, people think faster than you can speak. So on average, people can think 3 times faster than you can speak. So when I'm talking with you, Phil, I'm talking at this pace, beep, and your brain's going beep, beep, beep. So your brain's clicking 3 times faster. So I have to be mindful, and so is mine. So when you're talking to me, my brain's clicking 3 times faster. So I really got to be present. I got to really use some good active listening techniques to make sure I'm staying focused. So number one is, and real quick, I just want to do this aside. I've been traveling the country for 30 years, and I always ask the same question of most of my audiences. I say, look, how many of you have had formal listening skills training? Less than 15% of the audience has ever had any listening skills training. So we all have to work on that. Be a better listener. And let me just give 2 quick tips. As an extrovert, again, we like to talk. So and I'm an extrovert, by the way, as you probably know. So what I do is when someone's talking with me, I talk to myself. I have a little internal dialogue. I'm kind of repeating back in my brain some of the key points that they're saying to me to make sure that I'm focused as opposed to thinking about what am I going to say, or I don't like your tie. So number one, if you're an extrovert, think about the internal summary. It can help you stay focused. Another technique that you can't always do in person, but on the phone is take notes. Now, in person, it's not as polite to take notes, but on the phone, I'm a big note taker. I love to write things down. It helps me pay attention. And again, it's another active tool to keep you focused. So those are a couple things I think you can do. The activation step, you want to stay present. But how about keeping the receiver engaged? So when I'm one of the things I teach in my presentation skills workshop is I do the workshop and about it's a full day workshop. The first morning I'm talking about all these techniques. And then after lunch, I talk about the activation step when I tell the audience, since the moment you walked in this morning till right now, I have engaged you physically, mentally, and emotionally. Turn to the person next to you and let's see if you can come up with 10 ways I've engaged you. And people are amazed because, they're not even paying attention. Some of them are so subtle, like using their name or asking them a question. So what brings you here today? Or asking them to take a note on the handout. So there's so many ways of be thinking about engaging other people. So what I tell folks is think about the conversation and think about what can I physically, mentally, and emotionally do to keep this person involved. So you can interrupt me if I have a couple more thoughts if you want me to keep going.
No, keep going, Patrick. You're on a roll, buddy. This is important stuff, folks. So pay attention. I'm certainly tuned in. So please keep going. Yeah.
So I tell all my clients, look, keep a story file. I want you to start writing down any experiences you have that you can use to engage the receiver. So, for example, Phil, I'm sure you've got some wonderful success stories when somebody says, hey, could you come in and do a keynote for our conference? You might say, hey, I'd be happy to. And they say, can you do something, for healthcare? Hey, I will, happy to. I just did a healthcare conference a month ago. And I tell you what, it really went well. And so then you tell a success story. So having stories are great tools that I think a lot of salespeople don't use or could use more often.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then there's the simple things like smiling, nonverbal communication, right? More than half of your message is nonverbal. And so people forget the little things like a nice smile or some good eye contact, or even what I like to do is modulate your voice a little bit. And I tell all my folks, and I encourage everybody listening today, if you haven't audio recorded your phone calls recently, I highly recommend it. Just turn on your phone, record your phone call, and then listen to it and listen to how you sound. Are you verbally engaging, or are you very monotone, or do we have lots of, verbal pauses that are very distracting that could drive somebody crazy? So again, you want to think about everything you're doing that's going to pull the receiver in. So those are a couple of quick tips on the activation step. What do you think, Phil? How are those? Helpful?
Those are super helpful. I love the idea of a story file. I really think if you don't have stories, if you're a new salesperson, though, go out and read your company's success stories.
Yes.
Read them, internalize them, feel them, and remember the words that your customers use to describe you. So go out, find those case studies, and internalize them. And instead of saying, I did this, which is frankly not true if you're a brand new salesperson, you can say, we did this.
Yes.
And that's still totally legit because you never want to lie. You never want to lie.
Never.
You want to say, we did this because we did, right? Whether you just started yesterday or you started 20 years ago, it makes no difference. We did this as a company. And that's one tip that I have about stories that sometimes folks miss.
Yes. And then even making sure you have a good closing is a good activation tool, and a good opening. It's not just for a presentation. when you meet somebody, like you had a good opening, Phil. You said, hey, if we only had 30 minutes together, what would you say are 3 things that you'd like us to focus on that I can make sure we use our time effectively? That's a good opening.
Thanks.
So in advance, people, I think, need to think about the opening and think about the closing.
Couldn't agree more, right? That if we prepare, right, those are the only 2 things actually we have any control over, is the open and the close, right? The open, and if you're a phone rep, it's the open and then the voicemail greeting and the close.
Right.
So it's really important that you practice those, right? Think about all of the impact that you have. It's so, so important, right? Communicate with impact. Get a copy of Patrick's book. I'm going to tell you, folks, Patrick did not pay me enough to shill this. I'm telling you, though, he didn't pay me anything.
I didn't. I was going to say, I didn't pay anything, Phil.
Yeah, the check did not clear. It was, forgot to sign it. No, but this is a workbook. This is stuff you can do, folks. If you want to communicate with more impact, this is a fantastic book that you can fill in, you can work with your team on, you can communicate better. But Patrick, if you had one more tip that you wanted to share with folks, how they could communicate with more impact, what would it be?
Well, I'll tell you, Phil, it's in the transformation step, and it's basically this. As often as possible, take some time to debrief what you're doing and see what you do well and where you can get better, right? We always can get better. But I think a lot of us are so busy, we forget to take the 30 seconds or the 1 minute to say, okay, I had a luncheon today with Mary. Well, I did really well with this and this, but next time I have a luncheon, I'm going to make sure I do this. And so if you just take, a minute, a couple times a day or a week and debrief your experiences with customers, you're going to start to learn some things you do well, and then take a couple things you want to work on, and don't be afraid to tweak them a little bit and do them better the next time.
Awesome. I call that the perfect stage.
Yeah.
After you get everything done, it's not perfect, it's perfect. You get better, you work on improvement, you try to be better. That's really, really awesome stuff, Patrick. Really important, folks. How to communicate with impact. It's the title of Patrick Donadio's book. If you want to connect with Patrick, you go to patrickdonadio.com. That's DONADIO.com. Check that out. But Patrick, if people want to talk to you, besides your website, what's your favorite social media channel for connecting with people who have questions?
LinkedIn's probably the best way to get a hold of me. You can go there and you can click through and send me a message. If you'd like to, become a friend, that's great. I'd love to connect with you. But I'd say other than email, LinkedIn is a good tool. I use that quite often.
Awesome. So connect with Patrick on LinkedIn. Go to patrickdonadio.com. Pick up a copy of Communicating with Impact. Patrick, thank you so much for your time today. Helpful as always, my friend.
Phil, you're amazing, and I love what you do, and keep up the great work of getting the message out there to help people be connected.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Good stuff, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. Have an awesome day.